I told him not to stop, my voice firm yet trembling, but even as the words left me, something in my chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. Just days before, I would never have imagined such a sentence passing my lips. Back then, our life seemed ordinary enough, comfortable, predictable, and safe in its routine. Mornings began with coffee brewing before sunrise, the sound of the news murmuring in the background, and brief conversations about errands or bills. But somewhere in the quiet, a gap had formed between us, and I didn't notice how wide it had become until it was almost impossible to cross. He had started coming home later, each time with a different excuse. Meetings that ran long, projects that demanded his attention, traffic that kept him from walking through the door at his usual hour. When he did arrive, his eyes often looked elsewhere, like his body was here but his mind had already slipped away. I told myself it was just work, that he was under stress, that maybe we both were. But there was a heaviness in the way he carried himself, and it made me feel like a stranger in my own home. Little things began to gnaw at me. The way he kept his phone screen angled away when it buzzed. The quick press of a button when I entered the room, shutting down whatever had his attention. Once, I saw a small smile curve his lips as he read a message, but when I asked, he brushed it off as nothing important. I wanted to believe him. I forced myself to believe him. Even in our rare moments together, there was a distance I couldn't bridge. He used to hold me without thinking, his touch lingering as if he couldn't get enough of me. Now, his arms felt like a formality, a habit more than a desire. I noticed new cologne on his shirt once, a scent I'd never worn, never bought for him. When I asked about it, he laughed lightly and said a colleague had been testing fragrances at work and he'd accidentally gotten some on him. His tone was casual, but I couldn't shake the way my stomach knotted. Then came the name. It slipped out casually one evening, Sophia. He mentioned her while recounting something at work, but the detail seemed unimportant in the moment. I didn't realize it would echo in my mind for days afterward, paired with an uneasy curiosity I couldn't explain. Still, I told myself not to be paranoid. I told myself marriages went through seasons, that this was just another one we would weather. I didn't know then that the season we were in was already over, and that soon every answer I thought I knew would unravel, leaving nothing but questions I wasn't ready to face. It happened on a Tuesday, though the day itself held no special meaning until later. I was leaving a cafe when I saw him, or rather, I saw the back of a man who looked so much like him it made me stop mid-step. But when he turned, it wasn't my husband at all. His eyes met mine with a directness that startled me, and in the few seconds it took for him to smile, I felt something stir that I hadn't felt in a long time. His name was Daniel. We spoke only briefly at first, something about the weather, the bitter taste of the coffee, the kind of polite chatter that should have ended quickly. But it didn't. We ran into each other again the next week, as if the city had shrunk just enough to push us into each other's path. This time we sat together, and the conversation was different. Warmer, more personal. I caught myself laughing in a way I hadn't in months, maybe longer. He listened like my words were worth holding on to, as though nothing I said was too small or too trivial. I didn't realize how much I'd missed being heard until that moment. The meetings became a quiet pattern. Coffee turned into walks, walks turned into long conversations under dim lights, where the rest of the world seemed to fade. I didn't mean for it to happen. At least, that's what I told myself. He asked questions my husband no longer thought to ask. He remembered details that my husband seemed to have forgotten. And the worst part was how easy it felt, how quickly the guilt began to blur under the comfort of being wanted. The first touch happened almost by accident, though I'm not sure either of us would have pulled away if given the chance. Our hands brushed as we reached for the same menu, and instead of moving, his fingers lingered against mine. My breath caught, not from surprise, but from recognition of something I'd been starving for. The shift was subtle after that, but undeniable. Our messages turned playful, then flirtatious. Late at night, my phone would light up with his words, and I would hide under the covers, typing back with my heart pounding in my chest. I told myself it was harmless because nothing physical had happened. But I already knew that lines were being crossed in ways that couldn't be undone. The night it finally happened, we were alone, the air between us electric with everything we hadn't said aloud. When he leaned closer, I could have stepped back. I should have stepped back. Instead, my voice broke through the silence, low and certain. Don't stop. And just like that, the part of me I'd been holding on to, the loyal part, the faithful part, slipped away without a fight. The days that followed felt heavier, as though I was carrying a weight I couldn't set down. At home, I moved carefully, afraid that even the sound of my footsteps might give me away. My husband's eyes lingered on me longer than usual, but not in the way they used to. There was a watchfulness in them now, like he was studying me for signs he couldn't quite name. I tried to act normal, yet every word I spoke felt rehearsed, every movement calculated to seem effortless. The smallest details betrayed me. I stayed too long in the shower one evening, scrubbing my skin until it burned, as if I could erase something invisible. I caught myself humming under my breath while cooking dinner, and when he asked what I was so happy about, I froze before forcing a laugh. Once, I almost called him Daniel. The wrong name lodged itself in my throat, and I covered it with a cough, my pulse racing so fast I thought he could hear it. Daniel's messages came more often now, his tone no longer light but demanding. When can I see you? I need you. At first, I'd answered quickly, eager for the rush his words brought. But now there was a tension behind every exchange. I found myself deleting messages as soon as I read them, my fingers moving faster than my thoughts. I started locking my phone, then keeping it face down, flinching whenever it buzzed within earshot of my husband. One night, he asked directly, "Who's been calling you so late?" His voice was calm, but the calmness was worse than shouting. I told him it was just a friend from work who was going through a hard time. He didn't reply, just nodded once, his gaze fixed on mine as though weighing the truth. Then came the near miss. A friend almost caught me with Daniel at a small restaurant across town. I saw her walk in just seconds after he'd left for the restroom, her eyes scanning the room. I pretended to be alone, sipping my drink as if nothing about the situation was unusual. When she left without recognizing me, my relief was so sharp it felt like pain. The tension at home grew. He began to notice things, an unfamiliar scarf that wasn't mine tucked into the laundry, the scent of cologne that didn't belong to him lingering in the bedroom. I could feel the noose tightening with every day that passed, my double life fraying at the edges. Still, I told myself I had it under control. Still, I believed I could keep the two worlds separate. But deep down, I knew, he was watching, waiting, and sooner or later, the truth would land in front of him, undeniable and unforgiving. The moment came without warning. He was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in, his hands folded neatly, his phone placed in the center like an object of evidence. He didn't speak right away. The silence was heavy, pressing against my chest until I felt short of breath. Then he slid the phone toward me, the screen lit with a single message. It wasn't mine, but I knew who it was from. Daniel's words stared back at me, raw and impossible to deny. I can't stop thinking about last night. I tried to speak, to come up with something that might dull the blade, but my mind went blank. My husband didn't raise his voice. He didn't ask why or how. He just sat there, his eyes cold but steady, as though he'd rehearsed this moment in his head 100 times. That's when he said it, calm, measured, devastating. "I've been seeing someone too." The world seemed to tilt. The betrayal I expected to feel didn't come in the way I thought it would. Instead, there was confusion, disbelief, and a strange, hollow ache that came from realizing the ground beneath us had been gone for far longer than I knew. Then he said the name, and my chest tightened. It was Sophia. The same Sophia he'd once mentioned casually, the name that had echoed in my mind months before. The truth unfolded with brutal clarity. While I was finding comfort in Daniel, he had been finding it in her. The nights I thought he was working late, he wasn't. The moments I had been covering my own lies, he had been living his. We had been breaking each other at the same time, in the same ways, without even realizing it. There was no shouting, no dramatic ending. He stood, took his coat from the chair, and walked to the door. His keys jingled softly, the sound more final than anything he could have said. I thought he might turn back, say something, anything, but he didn't. The door closed behind him with a quiet click, and the house fell still. I stood there for a long time, staring at the message still glowing on the phone, the words blurring until they meant nothing. In that moment, the weight of everything settled over me. Not just the affair, but the years of silence, the slow erosion of something that had once felt unbreakable. I thought about the night I told Daniel not to stop, how certain I'd been in that moment, and how those words had pulled the final thread loose. I didn't know what would come next. All I knew was that everything that had mattered was gone, and I had been the one to let it slip away.